Dear colleagues, welcome to this important webinar for Greek universities. I'm very happy to welcome you today. I am Professor Alexandros Triantafyllidis. I am the chair of the SAR Greece section and also coordinator of the Greek part of partner that is participating in the Inspireurope project. This is, I think it's very important that we meet today and we discuss as Greek universities are more and more interested in how to host scholars at risk. And in the process, with the support of the Inspireurope project, we have today some excellent presenters who are going to discuss with you what has been going on at international, at European and national level as regards the support of scholars at risk. We're really happy to have you here. We have more than 80 registrations and from more than 15 universities around Greece. The webinar is going to be happening in English language, and I remind you that there is a question and answer feature on Zoom where you are invited to send in your questions throughout the webinar. So keep posting your questions. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of questions, and that's why our excellent colleagues here will be able to answer those questions for you, and we will answer them at the end of the webinar. We're going to keep it short. We don't want to give you too many details, but we will give you ideas and ways as regards also the financial aspect of how to host scholars at risk, the administrative process, and of course we are very, very happy to also have a scholar at risk, Professor Attis, who is in Greece and who's also looking for a place to host him in Greece or even throughout. So I think we can start. I will be the first to have 2 words about both Inspireurope and about the SAR Greece section. So if you let me, I will just share my screen now. So, as I said, I am a professor in the Aristotle University of Thessaloniki, and I'm the chair of the SAR Greece section. I have been involved in, apart from my research interest, I have been involved in projects as regards supporting refugees, refugee students, and refugee scholars for more than 5 years. Both previously with the Sucre Erasmus Strategic Partnership Project and also with the Inspireurope project, which we are participating right now. The Inspireurope project is a project that has been going on for 2.5 years. We have something like more than 6 months until this project is finished. It's a Marie Curie project, and it's a project where both associations like the European University Association or national associations representing national efforts to support scholars at risk, like the Alexander von Humboldt Foundation and the POS Foundation, but also there are specific universities as well, which are also playing pivotal roles in national campaigns and national actions to support scholars at risk, such as University of Oslo, University of Gothenburg, Jagiellonian University in Krakow. Our coordinator is the Maynooth University, which is also the host of the SAR Europe. The project has been going on for quite some time, and its ultimate purpose is, of course, to strengthen the support of scholars at risk within Europe, both at academic but also at non-academic context. And for that reason, we have been working a lot both with webinars appointed to academic institutes, but also to scholars at risk as well, to give them everyone ideas about how to move forward. In this process, this is why we're doing the specific webinar today as regards supporting Greek institutes and Greek academic institutes on how to support scholars at risk. Apart from that, of course, we are also working a lot with creating and writing up a lot of detailed handbooks as regards what is happening in Greece, what is happening in Europe, what is happening around national states, but also policy recommendations that will come out of that. The major role of the Aristotle University is to support actions and disseminate the interest and the work for supporting scholars at risk in South Europe, Southeastern Europe, the Balkans, and beyond. Some of the few things out of a lot we have done, you can all find them in the minute dedicated website of the Inspireurope project, where you can see all those publications. We have already worked as regards creating a mapping report, and where we collected information from a lot of academic institutes around Europe, but also from professors who were hosting scholars, but also from scholars at risk as well, trying to see what is happening in Europe the past years. We see the problems that arise as regards funding, even at the first place for scholars at risk, but also as regards a long-term funding for those people. There have been important new things happening at the EU level, even with the Bonn Declaration on Freedom of Scientific Research. However, the truth is that still there is no dedicated European level fellowship, and this is something that the Marie Curie scholarships are trying to work on, and Inspireurope is helping in that direction. There's also a publication on what's happening on national level actions in Europe with 13 different countries. Joel Hanisek is going to discuss a little bit more about that. And of course, the Greek paradigm was also there as well. So in the process of the Inspireurope, and thanks to the money from EU, but also from a lot of interest from Greek universities the past years, where we are discussing more and more about the importance of supporting and protecting academic freedom, not only within our universities, but also from colleagues from abroad. AUTH was the first Greek university to join the Scholars at Risk Institute, and Tina Malamati-Chapoujoglu is going to tell you more about the importance of joining SAR in her talk. From then on, we had some meetings with representatives from Greek universities, top level and administrative persons as well, who are working at these specific offices, which are important, which have a lot of role to play in supporting scholars at risk. And we are happy to say that since 2020, more and more universities are joining the SAR network: the Ionian University, the University of Aegean, the University of Thessaly. And as a result of that, we even had the launch of SAR Greece section, and you can see a photo from that ceremony. Pandion University is the latest university to join the SAR network, and we're having discussions with another 9 Greek universities. I'm happy to say I see that there are representatives from these universities and from more than that. In order to establish the SAR Greece section, we have been working and talking with our rectors most of the time. We are very, very proud and happy to say that the rectors of our universities and Greek universities are keen, they have a keen interest in supporting scholars at risk. We now have the aegis, the aegida, and the support of the Rector Synod, of the Vice Ministry of Education, Syrigos, and hopefully from other high-level national people, very high-level, hopefully very soon as well. We'll see how that goes. But this is something that we work with a lot of you. I know that a lot of you are interested. We have a lot of discussions from time to time about how we can develop and expand the network. In order to work on that, we have been discussing about SAR and about supporting scholars at risk in different events of the Sucre project, of the Inspireurope project, within even our Epicure alliance with Aristotle University is a part of. In the second Inspire Europe Outreach workshop, we even had the support of our Commissioner Margaritis Chinas, and we're already preparing a new workshop on the 31st of March, trying to expand SAR support in Southeastern Europe. We're constantly working at dissemination at the Greek level. The Ionian University has created an excellent dedicated website. We're constantly giving press releases on different occasions. And of course, we're giving interviews to raise awareness in the general public. The main question, of course, which is important for you, and we're going to discuss today with our excellent speakers, is funding. Until now, we have been successful within Aristotle University to find money from our research committee. The Ionian University is also, as far as I know, preparing to also create a scholarship from their own funds. We have been discussing with IIESRF, the State Scholarship Foundation, and we have some new things to talk about that, and we will talk about that today as well. And of course, we're talking with different ministries around Greece in order to secure more funding for scholars at risk, and we're going to discuss that for sure today as well. So this is as much as I wanted to say. You can find everything about Inspire Europe through the website or with the email. And of course, we can discuss with us for the SCARS Greece section. So I think I will stop here. And I would like to continue to invite Joel Hanisek to discuss his part. He is a policy and program manager at Scholars at Risk Europe. And he manages the EU-funded Inspire Europe project and supports the activities of SAR sections across Europe. So, Joel, I give the floor to you.
Thanks so much, Alexandros, for that kind introduction, and also for the invitation to be part of the webinar today. It's really absolutely wonderful to see this coming together, particularly after the launch of SAR Greece back in October. And I'd like to thank you and Malamate in particular for all of your hard work on that front. I know that there are many others who have joined the webinar today who are also working hard to protect and support at-risk scholars within the context of Greek academia. And it's one of the reasons why it's encouraging to have a webinar like this and to see the new interest that it's also generated within Greek HEIs. I suppose that hosting an at-risk scholar will be a new experience for many of you who are listening in today. And one of the things which I want to communicate, which is fairly simple, but important, is that you're not alone in the work here. Scholars at Risk is currently represented across more than 570 institutions in 40 countries. And there are 15 other national SAR sections that stand alongside SAR Greece. So just to give you today some sense of the breadth and scope of the work, there are many examples of good practices that you can take a look at in comparative fashion. And remember that there's not just one perfect way to host an at-risk scholar. I know that some of the speakers that follow on may be attending to some of the more specific points. So what I'd like to try to do at this point is to give a bit of a broader context for the hosting conversation itself. The first point with regard to hosting is obviously need. Back in August, at the start of the Afghanistan crisis, we circulated an urgent appeal to EU governments and institutions, which included a call to continue evacuation flights, increase resettlement quotas, and create expedited complementary legal pathways for candidates who demonstrated an existing host institution, job, or sponsor. This last point was made with the recognition that many of our European higher education institutions were and remain ready to host scholars in temporary positions. Now, almost 9 months into this response to Afghanistan, SAR has received 1,430 applications from Afghan scholars who are at risk. And I would note that this does not include non-qualified inquiries, so the actual number of applications that's being processed by our protection team is significantly higher than this. Only 19% of those are already outside of Afghanistan, and only 2% of those are in Europe. So the remaining 81% are still in Afghanistan. We currently have 60 open cases, 25 placements that are confirmed, and 17 scholars who are awaiting visas for travel. And we currently have 4 host countries where an at-risk scholar from Afghanistan has already arrived to be hosted. Those are one in Canada, one in Ireland, one in Switzerland, and one in the United States. I say all this as a reminder that as urgent as the situation is in most at-risk cases, the work of preparation for hosting does take time. And we know that as you prepare to host, you may face bottlenecks or challenges, particularly in the form of internal or cross-border travel restrictions. Those can be due to security concerns, lack of or delays in visa issuance for receiving countries, and also likely financial constraints. All of the above are especially true for at-risk scholars who are traveling with dependents or those who are unable to leave family who are ineligible to join them as dependents on a visa, for instance, elderly or extended family. So we know that there will also likely be delays in visa appointments and interviews throughout the hosting process. And with regard to Afghanistan in particular, we know that many scholars, for instance, have been displaced to Pakistan, where embassies are quite overrun with requests at present. Of course, as important as it is, the Afghanistan response is not the sole focus of SAR's global protection work. There are many other places that you might host a scholar from. Before Afghanistan crisis, SAR would regularly expect to place around 300 scholars annually. However, given the 1,400 applications from Afghanistan, which I've just previously mentioned, we're obviously hoping to encourage and support a number of new hosting opportunities, which is why the attendance on this webinar today and the significant interest from Greece at present is so very, very welcome. As many of you may already know, SAR's work encompasses 3 main areas. These are the areas of protection, advocacy, and learning. And those are the areas where together we engage in the work of standing in solidarity with at-risk scholars and promoting academic freedom. Across these areas, SAR's European office, which Alexandros mentioned, is hosted at Maynooth University in Ireland, helps to organize collective work in Europe around researchers at risk. And one of the ways we do this is through the European Commission-funded Inspireurope project, where Aristotle University of Thessaloniki is a strong and main partner. As just one example, through Inspireurope, we've been trying to review and consolidate information around visa processes at both the national and European levels in order to advance knowledge around visa pathways to Europe, particularly for scholars from Afghanistan. Seeing that many higher education institutions are ready to host scholars in temporary positions, we know that expediting visa processing by relevant authorities will help institutions and scholars to capture those opportunities. SAR has also developed specific resources to help HEIs around hosting at the institutional level. These are contained in our How to Host guide, and I'll share a link to that guide directly shortly in the chat function. Some of the pieces included in the How to Host guide include a hosting checklist, templates for sample invitation letters, and a sample budget. I believe that others may cover some of those specifics in greater detail, and if not, we can return to those in questions. In closing, therefore, I think that the one word which I want to underscore most in relation to the wider context of hosting is flexibility. SAR encourages that where possible, prospective hosts demonstrate flexibility with regard to scholars' disciplines in countries of origin, where it's possible, flexibility with regard to level of academic attainment. For instance, offers do not have to be confined to PhD holders alone, and flexibility in method and approach. That is, instead of issuing broad open calls for new candidates, which is likely to attract significant numbers of new or duplicate applications to organizations like SAR, as well as our partners at Scholar Rescue Fund, CARA, PAWS, and PSI, who are already processing hundreds of applications, we ask that you might please consider inviting nominations of candidates directly from these support organizations and to partner with us in the work of hosting from the start. And as you're having these conversations about hosting and the importance of protecting academic freedom within your institution, which may be another conversation in itself, I wanted to highlight one more resource, which is SAR's Free to Think Report 2021, which was launched in December. This annual report analyzes thematic and regional trends affecting individuals and higher education institutions, and gives examples and overviews of, for instance, violent attacks in higher education communities, the wrongful imprisonment and prosecutions of scholars, pressures on student expression, legislative and administrative threats, alongside recommendations for action. And we hope that you might find it a helpful resource in framing the wider conversation around the importance of hosting at your institution in 2022. With that, I think that my time is just about up. Let me thank you once more for your attention, and I look forward to any questions that you might have.
Thank you very, very much, Joel. We continue with Emily Borzcik. Emily is Assistant Director and Head of the European Office of the Scholar Rescue Fund. She relocated to Brussels, Belgium in Europe from 2021, and she heads the European Office. Emily works to build and strengthen the program's relationship with European partners and continues to oversee scholar applications and selection and contribute to strategic initiatives. Emily, thank you for your participation in this webinar. So we listen to you and the work that the Scholar Rescue Fund does on scholar support.
Great. Thank you very much, Alexandros and Malamati, for asking me to be a part of this webinar. I'm going to aim to give a detailed enough overview of Scholar Rescue Fund so you all can get a good idea of who we are and how we work, but I'm very open to further conversations later or to answer questions as they arise. As Alexandros said, I'm the Assistant Director at Scholar Rescue Fund. I've been with this program since 2013, and in exciting news for me, recently relocated to Brussels from New York to head our new small office here in Europe. So I'm really excited to work more closely with our many European partners. Just to start off, to avoid confusion as we go forward, I'll just clarify that the Scholar Rescue Fund is a separate program from SAR. We work very closely with scholars at risk frequently, as of course our work overlaps in many ways. We certainly collaborate when it's in the best interest of the scholars and useful, but we also very much work independently, and in many ways that allows us to assist more scholars who need help, that we can kind of work separately. So the Scholar Rescue Fund is part of the Institute of International Education, which is a nonprofit organization and a leader in international exchange. IIE is headquartered in New York, but we have several offices around the world that administer hundreds of international programs for student scholars and professionals. So at its most—
Emily, sorry to interrupt you. I think
I never shared my screen.
You haven't said, okay, yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I got too wrapped up in myself here. Let me share my screen quickly. Sorry about that.
Okay.
You didn't miss anything on the screen until this point, so thank you very much. Okay, so at its most basic, the Scholar Rescue Fund is a fellowship program for threatened scholars, and we work with university partners all over the world to arrange academic appointments for SRF Fellows. IIE's work in this area really began back in 1920, when IIE's leaders launched an initiative to assist university professors and students who are fleeing the Bolshevik Revolution and Stalinism. And in the decades that followed, IIE went on to provide support to scholars and students living amidst Nazi persecution in Europe, the Spanish Civil War, Hungarian Revolution, South African apartheid, and other periods of unrest. This work historically responded to individual crises as they arose across the globe. But to ensure that IIE would have a permanent mechanism to help scholars on an ongoing basis, IIE established the Scholar Rescue Fund in 2002. As Joel has said about STAR and the applications that they receive, there is an unprecedented need in this area. And this is reflected in SRF's growing application numbers. Each year we receive more applications than the year before, and we expect that trend to continue. Quite often, our applications reflect the headlines that you see in the newspapers. In 2021, SRF received the most applications from Yemen, Turkey, Afghanistan, Ethiopia, and Myanmar. But threats to scholars certainly are not limited to these countries, and we continue to see a steady stream of requests from countries like Cameroon, Iran, Syria, Venezuela, and many others. And since 2002, SRF has supported 952 scholars from 60 different countries. We arrange fellowship appointments for these scholars in 51 different countries, working with nearly 450 different host institutions. Our fellowship model, which I will elaborate on in just a minute, allows us to work globally, and we are often able to arrange fellowship appointments in a scholar's home region, which is really great because it does not limit us to scholars who can, for example, speak a second language. For example, we place many scholars in the MENA region who are Arabic speakers, or for example, scholars from Venezuela who can undertake their fellowships in Latin America or in Spain. And as you can see, throughout our history, about 65% of SRF fellows have come from countries in the MENA region, though our proportions are changing with the advent of academic crises in places like Turkey and Afghanistan. And in terms of our host partners, historically, we've placed about 1/4 of SRF fellows at institutions in Europe, though more recently, this proportion is closer to 1/3. In Europe, 22 different countries have hosted SRF scholars, including Greece. There has been one SRF fellow placed in Greece many years ago. I believe it was a scholar from Iraq. And I can provide more information about that if necessary, if helpful in the future. Placements in the MENA region also make up about 1/4 of our work, both historically and currently. This is especially important as we have worked with really great numbers of scholars from Iraq and then Syria and now from Yemen. So scholars typically apply to SRF directly via email. They submit certain required application materials, and our staff carefully reviews each one of them. We assess applications for both level of scholarship and for the severity of the threat in their home country. This process can be fairly extensive. It involves extended communications with the applicants and possibly with external experts who can advise SRF on scholarly credentials. After all, we are not academics, or on an applicant's reported situation in their home country. And then based on this staff vetting, select applicants are considered by the SRF selection committee, which does make all SRF final award decisions. In general, the selection committee awards anywhere from 50 to 65 new scholars each year. Though with the crisis in Afghanistan, we've recently made more awards than we historically have in a given year. The unfortunate reality is that we receive many more qualified applications than we can support, and we do end up having to decline many scholars, many accomplished scholars who have very legitimate claims to assistance. So what is the SRF Fellowship and how does this work exactly? So we work with our scholars to arrange year-long fellowship appointments with partnering higher education institutions. This is typically after they've been selected for the fellowship. The fellowship package includes a fellowship grant plus several other benefits. The fellowship grant is worth up to $25,000, and we ask that the universities to provide at least a matching amount to the fellowship. So really at a basic level, SRF is a cost-sharing program. But in addition to the fellowship grant, we provide additional funding for relocation and can assist with scholars booking flights for them and their families. We can often provide professional development and language training and an individual health insurance plan. This is in addition to the significant staff support that SRF provides to hosts and scholars as they navigate all of these processes before, during, and often even after appointments are over. So any SRF fellowship appointment is truly a collaboration among SRF, the host institution, and the scholar. Each fellowship may look different depending on the needs of the scholar and the host institution, and we really try to work with each institution to understand their needs, what they can provide, to arrange an appointment that is beneficial for everybody. One way that it might differ in different places is in places where a full match of the SRF Fellowship, totaling a $50,000 salary or stipend, would be excessive. For example, we know that some places this amount is actually very high for a visiting professor. And in those cases, SRF might lower our contribution to equal the contribution of the host. But in general, we still require a match. So it could be, for example, that SRF lowers its contribution to $15,000 and the host matches that amount. We can also sometimes consider direct benefits to be a part of the university's contribution. Things like housing or health insurance for a family that a scholar would otherwise have to pay for. These would be things that would offset the scholar's cost of living, and we could quantify those and consider them to be a part of the university's match. Many of our host institutions identify their match funding internally, whether it's a laboratory that has funding or a department or maybe a more central source like an international office. But this does vary widely based on the institution, and SRF doesn't really place any restrictions on how universities find this money. Third-party funding outside the university is also acceptable. We do have, for example, a successful partnership with the Finnish National Agency for Education, where the agency provides funding for Finnish universities to host SRF scholars. And this is a model that we would be eager to duplicate in other countries, whether on a formal level or on kind of an ad hoc, in an ad hoc way. So just to circle back a little bit to SRF's Afghanistan response, now that you've heard a little bit about how we work, we also have been inundated with applications, just as SAR and our other partner organizations have been. We have expedited our review of applications from Afghanistan, and so far have granted around 40 fellowships to Afghan scholars on an emergency basis. These 40 fellowships are in addition to the fellowships that we typically award, over the course of a year. So we've already almost doubled what we typically do in a year in order to respond to the Afghanistan crisis. But in general, those fellowships, they work the same way as any other. So how do you get involved? What do you do? So the best way to get involved with SRF is to join the Scholar Rescue Fund Alliance. This is our very simple kind of network of partners who are committed to offering practical support to SRF fellows. If you're interested in hosting an SRF fellow, you would join as a commitment partner, which shows us your commitment to hosting, and we can start a dialogue about what you can offer, the kinds of scholars that you would be interested, etc. We can keep track of you and approach you with opportunities as they arise. Just for the sake of time, I won't get into the other categories of Alliance membership, but there are other ways that you can join the SRF Alliance, even if your institution is not ready to commit to hosting a scholar. As an SRF Alliance commitment partner, one of the great benefits of that is that you would receive our quarterly placement list. And so this is an anonymous list of SRF fellows who are seeking placement. So rather than you having to come to us, we will come to you with a list of scholars who are currently in need of hosts. And I will leave it there. I could talk about this forever. There are a lot of details that I could cover. Please feel free to ask any questions or reach out to me separately. Thank you.
Emily, thank you very much for this excellent talk on other ways to support scholars through your rescue fund. We will move on with the next presentation. The next presentation is by Marie Tegner. She is working at the University of Oslo. They are also partners of the Inspireurope. Marit has responsibilities at the University of Oslo as the Senior Advisor in the Office for International Relations and Research Support. are to work with the international research cooperation outside Europe, and she is the institutional contact person for North-South cooperation for scholars at risk. Marit, good friend and colleague from Inspire Europe, floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to address you with the perspective of a host university. As Alexandros said, I'm also part of the Inspire Europe project, but I'll share more on experiences from host universities so you can get some inspiration and ideas from that. I will share my screen. Okay, so the topics that I will cover is very much related to hosting the scholars. So it's about who to host and preparing and welcoming the researcher, how to make most out of the stay, and then what's next. I'll just mention this publication that is showed on the side here, Pathways to Practice, Welcoming Scholars at Risk to Campus, Getting Started. I've written this together with my colleague from Gothenburg, Carolina Catoni, and we're in a very light way, touching on the same topics as I will be speaking about today, and which you will also find in the hosting handbook from SAR. You can find this guide on the website of the Inspire Europe project at my news. The University of Oslo has received up to 2021 16 scholars on 28 one-year stays. We have already received another scholar in 2022, and we're expecting a few in the coming months. So we have some experience with hosting. When it comes to preparing the scholars, there are several programs to connect with, as you heard earlier, the Scholars at Risk program, the Scholar Rescue Fund, and also some national programs. At the University of Oslo, we are cooperating both with Scholars at Risk and the Scholar Rescue Fund. Then you have the question of the funding. This has been mentioned by others and will be mentioned again later, I think. But it is possible to look for funding both externally and internally. Externally can be from national governments, foundations, programs, etc. And for the internal funding, there are also different options. At the University of Oslo, we get our funding for hosting scholars from our university board. But in some other institutions, they have a share between the central level and the faculty, for example. So because you have a lot of people involved, you should have everything from leadership down to a colleague at the host department. The leadership at University of Oslo, the research administration where I work, you have the HR administration and international staff mobility office helping with all kind of relocation questions. Of course, the host department is very important, which is the daily contact point for the scholar. And then we also have a Scholars at Risk committee involved in selecting scholars to come to the University of Oslo. I will mention that again. So when it comes to who to assist, this can differ from institution to institution. It can have to do with the profile and motivation of the host organization. At the University of Oslo, we see this as both a solidarity act with colleagues from other countries, but it's also enriching for our university to get other perspectives into our university. So it's a mix of these two. In some places, you can have refugees join. At the University of Oslo, we are actually only using this kind of program for those who are coming through programs like Scholars at Risk and Scholar Rescue Fund. So they all come with a researcher residence permit. It's very important to have an academic match with the host unit. So when selecting emergency in the risk situation is one thing, but it's also important to come to a place where they are interested in the same things as you. For the first time one is hosting, it might be easy to select someone who is already in Europe because they maybe had been able to stay 1 year in one university and then still needed assistance. And some universities maybe have a cooperation in a particular region, like I know another university has a lot of cooperation in Ethiopia, at the moment, they are now really looking into how they can help their colleagues in Ethiopia, but it could be other regions as well. And then it's a question if you should take the one in the most acute danger, which is normally the most complicated hosting, but of course very important. So I think it's good that there are different institutions with different focus. When preparing this, I had a look at the University of Oslo compared to the University of Trento in Italy. And I just wanted to show you that this can be done in different ways. So in Oslo, we get nominations from SAR, and then we have a SAR committee at the University of Oslo looking through those candidates and prioritizing among these. At the University of Trento, they have a call for proposals with a set deadline, and then they also have an interdepartmental committee selecting candidates. This means that in Oslo, we can act very quickly, while in Trento, they have, I think, 1 call or 2 calls every year. In Oslo, we find the host department after the selection, while in Trento, they have already found interested the host units at the university before they made the call. In Norway, in Oslo, it is not open to those with refugee status in Norway because we know that they have other very good programs that they could follow. So it's only those coming through Scholars at Risk, etc., and getting this temporary researcher residence permit, which is normally also very quick and efficient way to get a residence permit. In Trento, it is open for both those who come through Scholars at Risk, etc., and for those with refugee status in Italy. And I think for Greece, that is probably also very relevant because I know you have a lot of refugees in your country. Candidates in Oslo are employed in temporary positions and pay their accommodation from their salary, while in Trento they get a fellowship and they get free accommodation. All in all, it turns out to be more or less the same support, I guess. So in Norway, we have an exception from the general employment rule and the process. So it's following regulations for temporary positions and with some special adjustments, while in Trento they follow the normal regulations for fellowship processes. So the strength of this flexible system in Oslo is that it can be flexible and we can act very quickly in urgent cases, while the strength of the system in Trento is that it's predictable, fair, and transparent. And I think both of them are very useful in this whole landscape. The University of Trento currently has a call out. I put a link to it. I'm sure you will get all the presentations afterwards. So when we're preparing to receive a scholar, there are a lot of practical preparations like the contract, housing, immigration and travel, etc. For immigration, we have a system in Norway where the employer can do very much of the application for a residence permit from Norway, which makes it easier for the researcher. But this is probably different in different countries. And it's also good if it's possible for the scholar to meet with the host department and maybe know who is the academic mentor before arriving, but that's not always possible. And we're working now very much on how to make sure that we are handling the personal information of the scholars in a good way, so that it will not be getting to wrong people. In the welcome phase, I think it's very much similar to what is happening for other researchers. But these researchers at risk might have extra need for safety and also maybe for rest when they are arriving, and they might be very concerned about family members in coming with them or staying behind in their home country. During the stay, there's a lot of things to do, of course. The most important is that the researcher should be able to continue academic activity and networks. Some of them come with research that they find very important to continue, while others are more open to join whatever are the relevant projects at the host institution. And the academic mentor, I put this in red because it's so important that there is one academic staff member who can be kind of a mentor to discuss what to prioritize when it comes to academic activity, etc. And then also competence development is very important and can also be discussed with academic mentor, with the institutional contact person, etc. Safety and well-being is important during the stay, and this has influence on also the possibility to have academic activity, etc. So I just mentioned it, I won't go into details. And it's also important for the researcher to have a social network. And this is something that the institution can help, but of course it must be the responsibility of the researcher himself or herself, but maybe we can be helpful in finding places. And what happens after a stay? This is one of the questions that we always get when we're talking about hosting researchers at risk. This depends a bit on the situation of the scholar. Some want to, or most of them would have liked to go home, but mostly it's not possible. If it is possible, some return to their home country. Maybe the situation has changed. Then it's possible to apply for other, like open calls for normal positions inside academic institutions, but also outside. In some cases, it's possible to join NGOs or private companies, etc. Sometimes it's possible to obtain external funding or to get a new position through the Scholars at Risk network. And in some cases, it is relevant to apply for asylum, but then, of course, you will still need to continue a job search. Some key takeaways I want you to remember is that these researchers at risk, they really want to be seen as researchers and as resources that they can contribute. It's very important to have an academic match with the host unit. And it's very important that they get an academic mentor with whom they can discuss academic activities. And then I think it's important to see that in this work, there is a lot of need for flexibility, but there should also be some systems. To find the right balance in your institution is the way forward, I think. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Marie. Next one to speak is going to be Professor Attis. It is very important for Greek universities to know that highly qualified scholars at risk, researchers at risk are present within Greece, and they have been present for quite a long time already. And Professor Attis is just one of them. He is a professor of cardiovascular surgery. He worked in the field of aortic surgery in the USA and was the surgeon who performed the most aortic surgeries in Turkey. He used to be a rector at the SIFA University, a medical-themed university in Turkey. However, he was imprisoned while he was the rector. Unfortunately, he had to leave the country, and he's trying to start a new academic life again in Greece, where his family, unfortunately, is still in Turkey. Professor Attis, if you can have some of your words about your experience until now. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Professor Alexandros. I send my respects and love to all the participants from Athens, from Greece. First of all, I would like to thank Mr. Triantafyllidis, Mrs. Tina, and also Scholars at Risk for giving this opportunity. I will try to finish my speech in the 10 minutes given to me. I would like to briefly introduce myself. Dr. Alexandros mentioned it. I'm professor of cardiovascular surgery. I live in Athens right now. I have a residence permit and I have an identity ID and travel documents issued by the Greek government. The United States also gave an academic green card, and I'm still in process of getting this card. I have performed around 7,000 open heart surgeries procedure in my professional life. After 2001, I specialized in aortic disease, and also I did a postdoctorate on aortic disease in the United States in Baylor College and Texas Heart Institute, Memorial Hermann Hospital, and I complete my education with first-class professor who are Professor Coselli, Professor Safi, Professor Limeir, and etc. I returned my country and established an aortic surgery clinics in my hospital until, unfortunately, I went to prison. I was the doctor who performed the most aortic surgeries procedures in Turkey, not only in Turkey, but also in the 4th number in Europe and also 9th number of all the world. I was involved in the establishment of Turkey's first health temp university. You see my university logo behind me. I was director of Shifa University. My mother language in Turkey is Turkish. English is my son mother language. I lived in the United States 3.5 years, and I finished my B courses, language courses in Greek and at Cappadocian University. I'm currently taking right now in a C course, Gamma course. My Arabic level is also B2 level. In my country, unfortunately, 15 universities and thousands of schools were closed, including my university, unfortunately, due to pressure of the Erdogan regime and also fake coup. My wife was a chronic kidney patient. I donated kidney to my wife, and then I had to flee my country. My wife and daughter are still in Turkey. They are also medical doctors. My wife cannot leave the country because of her illnesses and also her ongoing court cases. I'm sorry, I do not want to exploit feelings here, but this is the reality that thousands of academics like me live. Maybe I'm one of the few having the least problems. My friends, academic or not, I think that there is no difference between, and unfortunately died in the Medici River, and also agency while trying to escape. You can consider as a people feeling the unfortunately Hitler regime. After all this, if we focus on our main subject, in fact, the attempt was made to draw a roadmap for what could be done here. As an academic who has experienced these problems, I think that I hope the European Union and also the DOATAP institution in Greece will accelerate the diploma equivalence process. It's necessary to work with DOATAP to speed up the diploma equivalence process. No one knows, but I'll say in it anyway, and the DOATAP is the institution that gives diploma equivalence to university graduates in Greece. It has been months since I received the European qualification passport for refugees documents approved by the European Council, but unfortunately, no university or no hospital in Greece accepts me with these documents. I have to wait for the DOATAP process. I've been waiting for months, but I couldn't make any progress. Something needs to be done so that you and faculty member also in Greek talk to DOATAP and speed up the process. It's so important, I think. I believe that non-government organization like you and another, I don't know what the name are, should hold talks with institutions on these issues. Greek universities can provide these academics with the opportunity to teach part-time in the language they can teach. I accept that there may be frauds. Yes, it's a reality in these works, but it should not be difficult to detect it. Unfortunately, with so much experience, we only teach online. I'm ready to work and train students at Greek universities as a visiting professor without receiving any money. I have said and written this in many places, but I have not been successful. I do not want to go another country in Europe. I love this place. I love the Aegean. I have an American green card, but I do not want to go to America, United States. I just like to go to Baylor College, Memorial Hermann, where I used to work for short-term works. Yes, it's possible. I learned in my speech in giving a recent example. Mrs. Tina is also aware of this. Mr. Alexandros is also aware of this. I applied to the project of Aristotle University, but although I wrote to 30, 40 faculty members, none of them gave to letter of intent. I do not know if my application was accepted or not. If there was no letter of intent requirement, maybe I would have been accepted to this project. had the same problem last year also. For 2 years, my application was not even accepted. I had a professor friend from another university. He wrote, a Greek professor, he wrote the letter of intent. They didn't accept it there. It's normal. It's normal. Unfortunately, I do not know many people in Greece. We are struggling for now. Let's see. In the last sentences, I would like to say this. I have been working as a clinical medical doctor for 30 years. I believe that clinical position should be increased in the scholar at risk programs in medical fields. I think that. We say, I hope everything goes well from Greece, which is the one of the most beautiful countries in the world. I think that with philosophy, music, and also coastline of 15,000 kilometers. In Greece, it's said as, I hope everything goes well, mean that elpizo oti, ola tapane kala. Thank you again for giving this opportunity. Sas efcharisto olus parapol is mean that thank you so much, everyone.
Professor Attis, thank you so much for pinpointing problems that you and other colleagues of yours are facing, trying to find a brighter future, which is analogous to your high qualifications.
Thank you for your effort. Thank you for your effort.
We will finish with the last talk today from Malamati Tsapoutzoglou. Malamati, Tina, is not just a speaker, she's actually my right hand. We have been working together all these 5 years, and she's the one who is working every day as well for the Inspireurope project and for supporting the SAR Greece section on administrative work, and not only administrative. She is a special laboratory staff member of the School of Psychology from the AUth. She holds a BA in Philosophy, Education and Psychology and a Master in Cognitive Psychology. And as I said, we have been working together for the past 5 years in the SUCRE project, the Inspireurope project, in the SAR Greece section. So, Tina.
Thank you, Alexandros, for your so nice introduction. I have to admit that you have been an inspiration for me. And with that, let me share my screen. I'll try to give some details from our experience so far, with the hope that our colleagues in other universities will find useful information. And of course, we are always here to help, as others have helped us before. So, my presentation is about what we have done, what are the basic procedures we have used, and what we aspire to do as next steps. We're going to briefly tell some details about how to join and why to join SAR and SAR Greece, and share our first experience from welcoming a researcher at risk at AUth. And I'll close my presentation with what we can do next and what actions we're engaging in. As Alexandros has already mentioned, Scholars at Risk Greece section was launched last year. We are now counting 5 members, and I have informal information from the University of Crete, their representatives here, so they can verify, that have already completed some of the steps towards becoming a SAR member. Membership to SAR is open to accredited higher education institutes and associations all over the world. The basic requirement: commitment to academic freedom and the willingness to actively work on this direction. SAR, when you become a member of SAR, you rightfully join SAR Greece. and you automatically become part of SAR Greece. The steps that Greek higher education institutes need to follow are pretty much the following. You need a decision of the Senate. In the same decision, the Senate usually has to designate a faculty member that can act as a representative, and then this representative, in contact with scholars at risk, he or she proceeds with the membership agreement, and after this is completed, the final step is the subscription payment. Why, you could ask, join SAR? It's a great opportunity to actively engage in all SAR's activities on protection, advocacy, and learning, and contribute to human rights protection and the promotion of our university values. There are benefits from the involvement in the national section as well. First of all, in matters of pooling resources, financial and human, on sharing and deepening of expertise on hosting, advocacy, and on promotion of values, and of course, being a member of SAR and SAR Greece gives you access to many support networks within national sections, between sections, and across global networks. And this is a way to raise a stronger voice. To learn more about joining SAR, the details, you can visit SAR website or contact Madeline Everett, our dear colleague from Scholars at Risk, who is in charge of who is a membership program assistant. And of course, all SAR Greece members are here for you to assist and guide you through the process. Moving on to our experience on how to host a scholar in Greek universities. Of course, there may be other ways. We'll share what we did. First of all, before even starting to prepare a call, we, as part of the Inspireurope project, prepared a welcome guide for researchers wishing to come to Aristotle University. There are many sections, researchers at risk, for example, where we include terminology, target groups, useful websites, sections on first steps and arrivals, on settling down, a dedicated section on Aristotle University and Thessaloniki, and a section with useful information, which includes many things from municipality services, social security system information, to basic communication. You can find some first communication skills there. This guide is primarily specific for our and our city, Thessaloniki, but can be useful for other institutes as well. For example, it can be used as a model for other welcome guides, or scholars at risk or colleagues that are interested to know more can find details on legal issues like visa processes, embassies, and all that. Now, after the workshop, our first workshop in Thessaloniki, our university decided to fund internally through the funds of our research committee a scholarship, a one-year scholarship for a researcher at risk. Our procedure is more similar to the one from the University of Credo, which Marie presented earlier. Before proceeding with this, I have to express our thanks both to scholars at risk for guiding us through this procedure, providing us samples of other calls, and of course to our research committee, who didn't have any experience on this matter, but they were very willing to work with us and discuss how to construct a call that would be clear, but not but accessible to as many researchers as possible. So our call had to follow the normal regulations for all calls, for all the processes from our research committee. The call is published with a deadline nationally, and we use the EURAXES network as well for more publication. And after the closure of the deadline, we have an interdepartmental selection committee to evaluate the applications. Our call was designed to be open for researchers at risk with at least a PhD degree. There was no restrictions on subject areas, as Aristotle University has almost all the main subject areas covered, and the basic requirements was that the applicant should have a confirmed at-risk status. I will say some more later, and a letter of intent from academic mentor et al. I need to say something here outside the presentation. This letter of intent that may pose some difficulties, like Professor Attis has mentioned, it was a way to secure that we could host effectively the researcher that we could select. That's why we had this requirement, so that, as Marit mentioned, academic mentorship is very important when hosting a researcher, either at risk or not. So it was our first try. Probably will in the next calls we can be more flexible. Just to give you an idea, we tried to be clear about what the call we need to have as a risk status. We tried to include as many people as possible. So we had refugee status, subsidiary protection status, but for people not having this yet, we could accept applications if they were accompanied by recognition as a risk scholar by SAR. Recognition by SAR was enough to be eligible. And of course, we had in mind the people that were still in home countries and were identified as scholars at risk by Scholars at Risk organization. The application requirements was the proof of a risk situation as described above, a doctoral PhD degree, and here I have to say that to avoid the delays that DOATAP is the Greek NARIC for those of you, if we have not familiar with the Greek system, we accepted any proof of the doctoral degree without needing a recognition. We had, as usual in the calls from the research committee, good knowledge of the English language. And in order to have some concrete idea about the research proposal, we asked for a short research proposal. And the main point was the invitation letter of intent from an faculty member, which would assume the responsibility to host, work with the researcher, the selected researcher, and according to the regulations, submit an evaluation report at the end of the scholarship. So this procedure is clear, transparent, as Marit said. It's rather time-consuming, so it's not very useful for emergency situations. Anyway, we managed to, through the selection process, to have our first researcher at risk last year. He was from Turkey. We had to take care of all the matters that Marit mentioned. We had welcome, not one meeting, more than one meetings. Our rector was kind enough to welcome him in person as well. But both me and Alexandros had met with him in several occasions for practical, besides academic issues. He had a regular meeting with the academic mentor, who was very supportive and very willing to work with him. But we had to face the practical issues. For example, our scholar came in Thessaloniki, moved from another city before the start of his contract. So he had to find accommodation. Luckily and thankfully, Scholars at Risk supported him for this time and secured him accommodation. But then we had to help him find a permanent place, which is not easy if you know to rent a place on your own. But we managed with this because we guaranteed for him, and it was okay. We had problems, difficulties, not problems, slight, like how to sign the contract in our research committee, and they need to translate the contract because our contracts in our research committee, as you may know, are signed digitally. He didn't have a digital sign, so it's just a way to show you that you have to think the little things and the big things as well. We had some difficulties with the bank because in order to have a bank account, you have to accommodation address, you have to have an ID, a valid ID. Our researcher was still in the process of getting an asylum, but we found the solutions for almost everything. For example, about the payment, our research committee helped us a lot and utilized what we call, I have forgotten now because it's many years that we don't use them, crossed checks to pay for him. So little and bigger things were in order. And of course, we made arrangements to attend for free Greek language courses at our school, at our university's School of Greek Language. So everything seemed to run smoothly. However, we had a very happy development. Our scholar was managed to reunite with his family very early, much earlier than expected in the USA. So we are happy to host researchers at risk. We are more happy when they are not anymore at risk and they can continue their life as they wish. So after deliberating with our research committee, we are now on our second call for a research at risk. It's pretty much the same. For colleagues interested, we can share all the details. We had some small changes. For example, in order to include possible candidates from Afghanistan, we added the category on people in an expedited process to be identified as scholars at risk. And of course, gaining from our first experience, we provided, for example, a sample for the required invitation letter of intent, so that we could help people and their mentors to correctly submit their proposals. Our call deadline is now extended until the beginning of March. And now, going on to my last topic, what about funding? We tried to do what we could with internal funding from our university's funds. Other members of SAR Greece are planning similar calls. For example, the Ionian University that Alexandros has already mentioned is preparing a scholarship. They are fortunate enough to have to be able to provide accommodation for their scholar. So this is a plus. So internal funding is important, but not enough. We at SAR work extensively on finding other sources of external funding, and we are devoted in developing a common funding scheme within SAR Greece members. That means that we have an idea that the research committees of the members of SAR Greece can join forces and offer a common funding scheme. And I'm happy to tell you that our efforts for the other thing, to secure support from the National Agency of Scholarship, the State Scholarship Foundation, or IIESRF as we know it, has been very productive. The National Agency, according to the Vice President, Professor Glavinis, is willing to fund a limited symbolic number of scholarships. And most importantly, it's dedicated to warmly encourage Greek universities to establish temporary positions with a partial funding from the Institute, and this will make co-funding from the National Agency much easier. So we are working on this direction right now. Finishing my presentation, I would like to remind you to stay informed about Inspireurope, about Scholars at Risk, and on the dedicated page of the Ionian University about SAR Greece. Thank you all. Just to remind you, we will be happy to have you all in our regional outreach workshop on March 31st. I hope I managed to give you some insight on how we work, and I'm here for your questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tina, and thank you from my heart for all the work that we do together these past years. I want to thank all of you for all of the presenters and also all the participants to the webinar. We are running a bit late. We have been able to answer most of the questions in the Q&A session, so I think we have covered most of those. There were different questions as regards how do you assess if someone is at risk, and also what is a scholar at risk in general. My good colleagues Marit, Joel have already answered those. So I don't think if you would like to say something as a concluding remark, we will, as I said, share all the presentations to all the participants. I also invite Ioanna Tsiligianni from the University of Crete to call us and to discuss a little bit more about how we can help and maybe start a contract with the Scholar at Risk through other means of funding, as even European funds. We can have some ideas about that. And that's all from me. If you would like to, I give the floor to the presenters if they would like to say something as a concluding remark. Yes, Marit.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that in Norway, we have had a Scholars at Risk Norway section for more than 10 years, and this has been very useful for each and every institution in developing how we can work with this so that we can solve the challenges together. And I'm really happy to see SAR Greece, and I'm sure you will be able to cooperate in the same way. I wish you good luck.
Thank you, Marit. SAR Greece section is strong. We are good colleagues from all these universities, and we're working hard on that area. Any other questions, concluding remarks? If not, I do want to thank everyone for their participation here. I am very, very happy about the high interest from the Greek universities. There has been a lot of people who were participating in this webinar, which shows that there is momentum building up the past years. So I do hope that we will be able, more universities, to support more scholars at risk from Turkey, but from Afghanistan as well. And you also the high number of people that are asking to be supported in European and American universities. So thank you so much. We invite all of you to the next Inspire Europe workshop, as Tina said, and I promise that we will have more talks with IIESRF, with the national agency. So hopefully IIESRF alone, IIESRF with the ELKE, with the research committees of the universities, or with the Scholar Rescue Fund as well, we can work together and have more funds for scholars at risk. Thank you again for your interest.
Thank you so much, Dr. Alexandros. I'm happiest one. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank you. See you.
Thank you.
Taleme, epomeni.